It begins in the quietest moment of the night, when nothing is expected to happen and everything feels stable enough to trust. You are asleep, or at least you think you are. There is no sound, no movement, no signal that anything unusual is about to take place. The world rests in its usual rhythm, unaware that by morning, the definition of identity will be completely rewritten. And then you wake up, not suddenly, not violently, but with a strange awareness that something is different. You open your eyes, still adjusting to the dark, expecting the same room, the same silence, the same привычное ощущение одиночества. But you are not alone. Someone is standing there, at the edge of the room, still, watching. For a second, your mind refuses to process it. It tries to find a logical explanation, something safe, something that fits within the rules of reality you understand. An intruder, a shadow, a dream that has not ended yet. But then the person steps forward, and you see their face. Your face. Exactly. No difference. No distortion. Not similar. Identical. You freeze. Not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Recognition. Because it is not just the appearance. It is the presence, the posture, the way they move, the way they look at you. It is you, standing in front of you. At first, neither of you speaks. There is no need, because in that moment, something passes between you that does not require words. Understanding, and at the same time, confusion. You take a step back. They do the same, not mimicking, not copying, reacting independently, which means one thing: they are not a reflection. They are not an illusion. They are real. Across the world, the same moment unfolds. Millions of people wake up to the same impossible reality. A second version of themselves. Standing, waiting, existing. At first, there is silence. Not because people are calm, but because the brain cannot process what it is seeing fast enough to react. Then, slowly, the world begins to respond. Phones light up, messages flood in, people call each other, voices shaking, trying to confirm what they are seeing. Is there someone in your room? Do they look like you? Are they acting? Within minutes, it becomes undeniable. Every person on Earth now has a clone, not created in a lab, not delivered by any known system. They simply appeared, at the same moment, everywhere. And they are not empty. They are not silent copies. They think. They move. They react. They speak. And when they do, they sound exactly like you. The first conversations are the most disturbing, because they reveal something no one expected. The clone knows everything you know. Every memory, every thought, every experience. It is not learning you. It already is you. You ask a question. It answers before you finish. You hesitate. It understands why. There is no introduction. No need to explain anything, because there is nothing to explain. You are both the same person, and yet you are not, because now there are two of you, and that creates a problem the world has never faced before. Identity is no longer singular. Within hours, society begins to fracture under the weight of this realization. At first, people try to treat clones as extensions of themselves. They stay close, observe each other, test boundaries, trying to understand how this duplication affects their existence. Some cooperate immediately, sharing tasks, dividing responsibilities, living as if they are two parts of the same whole. But that illusion does not last, because even if you start identical, you do not stay that way. The moment you experience something different, you begin to change. One of you speaks first, the other listens. One moves, the other stays. And in that difference, however small, identity begins to split. Within hours, clones begin to diverge. Not physically, but mentally. Slight differences in experience create new thoughts, new reactions, new perspectives. And those differences grow, because identity is not static. It is shaped by what you lived through, and now each version of you is living something different. At the same time, the world begins to react at a larger scale. Governments issue emergency statements trying to understand what this means for law, for ownership, for responsibility. Who are you legally? Which one of you owns your home, your money, your identity? If one of you commits a crime, who is responsible? Both or only one? The system has no answers because it was never designed for this. Workplaces collapse into confusion. Employees arrive with duplicates. Two versions of the same person, both capable, both qualified, both claiming the same role. First, it seems like an advantage. Double productivity, double presence. But quickly, it becomes unstable. Because which one stays? Which one leaves? And who decides? Relationships are hit even harder. A couple sits in a room. Now there are 4 people, 2 of each, all identical, all aware, all remembering the same history, and yet, within hours, small differences begin to appear. One version reacts slightly differently. One says something the other would not. And suddenly, the connection is no longer clear, because love, trust, familiarity were built on uniqueness, and now uniqueness is gone, or worse, divided. At the same time, something deeper begins to emerge. Competition, not with others, but with yourself. Because your clone is not just someone else. It is you, with the same abilities, the same knowledge, the same potential. And now you are forced to confront something that was always abstract, but is now real. If there are 2 of you, which one is better? Which one deserves more? Which one is the original? And does that even matter anymore? As the first day unfolds, as people begin to separate, to explore, to test the boundaries of their new existence, one thing becomes clear. This is not just duplication. It is division, not of bodies, but of identity. Because for the first time in human history, the question is no longer, who are you? It is, which one are you? And as that question spreads across the world, as billions of identical faces begin to live different lives, one realization settles in. You were never meant to meet yourself, because once you do, you can no longer pretend you are unique, and that may change everything. It does not stay equal. That is the first thing people understand once the initial shock begins to fade. In the beginning, the 2 versions of you feel identical, like mirrored halves placed side by side, sharing the same memories, the same habits, the same way of thinking. But equality does not last, because the moment time moves forward, you begin to separate. At first, the differences are small, almost invisible. One of you speaks first in a conversation. The other stays silent. One chooses to leave the room. The other stays behind. These are simple choices, almost meaningless on their own, but they create something new. Different experiences. An experience is what shapes identity. Within hours, those small differences begin to grow. You notice it in the way your clone reacts to something you once agreed on. A different tone, a slightly different opinion. Not completely opposite, but not exactly the same either. It is subtle, but it is enough, because now you are no longer the same person. You are 2 people who started the same, and that changes everything. At the same time, the world begins to reorganize around this reality. Governments attempt to create classifications, to define what a clone is in legal terms, to determine ownership, rights, responsibilities. But every attempt runs into the same problem. There is no original. Both of you remember being the original. Both of you have the same past, the same identity, the same claim, and there is no way to prove otherwise. The concept of individuality begins to fracture, not disappear, but split. Each person becomes a pair, and each pair becomes a conflict. In some cases, cooperation continues. People divide their lives in practical ways. One works, the other rests. One handles responsibilities, the other explores opportunities. They treat the duplication as an advantage, a way to extend themselves beyond natural limits. And for a while it works, until something else appears, desire, because even if you share the same starting point, you do not share the same present. One of you begins to want something different, a different job, a different life, a different path. And that is when cooperation turns into tension. Because now you are not just sharing existence, you are competing for it. Who gets to live the life you imagined? Who gets to stay in the place you built? Who gets to be the version that moves forward? At the same time, relationships begin to break in more complex ways. A person does not just have one partner anymore. They have two versions of that partner, and those two versions begin to change. One becomes more distant, the other more attentive. One chooses a different path, the other stays. And suddenly, love is no longer a simple connection between two people. It becomes a choice between versions. I prefer this one, a sentence that was never supposed to exist. And yet it does, because even if both started the same, they are no longer equal. Families fracture in similar ways. Children now have two parents who are technically the same person, but who begin to act differently over time. One may become more patient, the other more strict. One more present, the other more distant. And that creates confusion, because identity is no longer stable. It is evolving in parallel. At the same time, something deeper begins to emerge inside individuals. Confrontation, not with others, but with yourself. Because for the first time, you are forced to observe your own behavior from the outside. You see how you react, how you speak, how you think, but now it is not just internal. It is visible, external, real, and sometimes uncomfortable. You begin to notice flaws you once ignored, habits you once justified, decisions you once believed were correct. Because now there is another version of you making different choices. And that comparison becomes unavoidable. Some people grow from it. They learn, they adjust, they improve, because they can see what they could have been. But others, they resist, they compete, they try to prove that they are the better version, more successful, more capable, more worthy. And that competition escalates, not always violently, but internally, psychologically. Because losing to someone else is one thing. Losing to yourself is something entirely different. At the same time, society begins to shift in unexpected ways. The value of individuality changes. It is no longer defined by uniqueness of origin, but by uniqueness of direction. Who you become matters more than where you started. Because everyone started the same. This leads to a new kind of pressure. Not to be better than others, but to be different from yourself. People begin to make choices not just based on what they want, but based on how they want to separate from their clone. They seek divergence, individuality, distinction, even if it means going against their own perversionary tendencies. Because being identical is no longer acceptable. It is limiting. Over time, the world fills with versions of people who began as the same, but have become something entirely different. Some succeed, some fail, some change completely, some remain almost identical, and that variation creates a new understanding of identity, not as something fixed, but as something that exists in multiple forms at once. At the same time, something else begins to happen. Distance, not physical, but emotional, because as clones diverge, they stop seeing each other as the same person. They become others, strangers who share a past. And with that shift, the connection weakens. Some choose to separate completely, living different lives, never interacting again, as if the duplication never happened. Others remain connected, maintaining a relationship that is unlike anything that existed before. Not friendship, not family, but something in between. A shared origin, a shared memory, but a different identity. And as time passes, as the world continues to adapt, one realization becomes clear. The clone was never the problem. The problem was what it revealed. That identity was never fixed. That the person you are is not a single version, but one of many possibilities. And now those possibilities exist at the same time, living, acting, choosing, separately. And in that realization, a final truth begins to settle. You are not defined by who you were, because someone else is already living that version. You are defined by what you choose next, because that is the only thing that can separate you from yourself.